Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream podcast. My name is Nero, and today I'm joined by Daniele Saccardi. He is the senior team lead of digital PR, online reputation management for Preply. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on.
Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe, share with your friends, rate the podcast. The more you do that kind of stuff, the more we can have great guests like Daniel from Preply. And so, first of all, quick congrats. We're recording this after you and your wife have had your second kid. So I appreciate you making the time. I know how, crazy that can be. You got two under two.
Yeah. It's insane.
Well, unfortunately, we're not here to talk about, it's not, a parenting podcast today, but we're here to talk about Preply. I have been following Preply for a few years and Preply's growth. Preply has been doing some of the coolest, most creative, and seemingly successful digital PR content out there. You'll see, as we talk about this too, Preply, I think one of the unique things is you've had some success, in all these different markets, which is, I think, probably one of the things that's driving a lot of the success. I mean, looking at some of the metrics I pulled here, since 2020, you guys have really been crushing it. 12,000 unique referring domains, over 3 million in organic traffic. This is, just pulling the stuff from Ahrefs. My favorite ones, and we'll get into this, people have maybe come across, it's the rudest US cities, that's got over 200 of linking root domains, cities that swear the most, 175 business buzzwords. These are ones that I'm sure you've seen, but it's the kind of stuff that, to me at least, is inspiring. And I think you do a great job of kind of keeping the focus around language. That seems to kind of be the theme of most of this stuff that does really well. So I wanted to kind of start there and, how people can think about their brand and why maybe the focus is on language for Preply, and kind of how you honed in on that as the kind of core topic of choice, I should say.
Yeah, so the name of the game for us is really increasing our referring domain count over the last few years. The competitors in the space are pretty large. Everyone knows Duolingo, absolutely huge. But they're also smaller and more agile competitors. And the idea was, how can we get the most referring domains, over the line? And we quickly found that just talking about education and learning led to journalists being, I don't say they're being icy to us, but it's not a sexy subject. It's not going to be a headline on the New York Post. So we started to find subcategories around language that we could talk about that would be interesting to journalists. And that really, we started to fly after that. So rudest cities is an example of that. We're looking at culture, so it's language and culture. When you learn a language, it's important to immerse yourself in the culture. So we use that as an angle into a whole new area that we can talk about. And on a flip side, we had a campaign called Business Buzzwords. And the idea there is one of the key users of Preply is people who are trying to advance their career. People learn a language to better themselves, to get a better job, whatever it might be in their professional life. So there you have another angle, people that you can reach in Business Buzzwords. We had a fun tongue-in-cheek approach to it, looking at which buzzwords are the most annoying, for example. Things like I said, like getting over the line.
Lowest hanging fruit, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, and I kind of probably jumped ahead a little bit. You and I were talking before this, and you mentioned, you have recently moved digital PR in-house, but before that, you were working with agencies, I assume?
Yeah. So we've always had a hybrid working model. Back in 2020, it was very much SEO outreach. And then as we moved into digital PR, we really needed the muscle from agencies. And we've built that up plenty. And now we're at a point where we're twisting that back, pulling more in-house. But we are still using agencies and still working with some really great agencies out there that help us come up with cool campaign ideas. And also PR agencies is one thing that in-house that we can do is we can work on the ideation phase do the creatives, and then give it to a PR agency, a traditional PR agency with the specific KPI of please get a link if you can. That works really well in Latin America, in Turkey, in Japan, where you don't have digital PR agencies. That's usually it's quite Anglo-centric, especially UK, US. So yeah,
Yeah.
these hybrid models of ways of working where it's just the end goal is how do we get as many powerful links as possible.
Well, so going back to something you said, I think this is something that a lot of organizations run into. It's just this idea of like, so you said you started kind of doing SEO outreach, and you do have a lot of kind of these hybrid pieces that it seems like you're doing, digital PR kind of type outreach, but they also rank for some keywords, and we'll get into that. But what made you realize that, hey, digital PR is more the route that we want to go?
Well, we iterated a lot on our strategy because really, I think the best approach to anything in marketing is to go in with question marks. What do we need to do, and not assume that you have the answer. So we started off by going for high relevancy links, so going to universities and doing outreach to universities, creating tools that were highly industry specific. But we found that the link velocity wasn't there. And I'm not even talking about link velocity as in, coming in quickly. Over time, it was just a low count of links. Digital PR fixed that. And we saw that as we implemented more digital PR and our referring domains grew, our revenue was going up, rankings were going up. So we correlated those things together to scale digital PR from a paid perspective, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask about kind of the leading indicators of success for digital PR, and it sounds like revenue, traffic.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about building links, were you looking at velocity from some of the competitors and kind of putting yourself up against them? And that's kind of you realizing it's not quick enough as compared to competitors?
Yeah. So one of the things that you can do is you can look at how many referring domains your competitors have, and then the velocity at which they're building them, and then calculate how many domains you would need to build monthly in order to outpace them by 2028, for example. And that's how you create that long-term strategy.
Yeah, I love that. That used to be one of our big things when I worked at Siege Media. That's kind of how we would pitch. I think a lot of the link building efforts, content marketing in general, was looking at that link velocity. It just makes a lot of sense. What kind of scale did you ultimately ramp up to at like the peak of your digital PR?
In terms of links?
Sorry, in terms of how many posts maybe were you doing? How many campaigns were you doing per month, let's say?
At our peak, and this sustained for maybe a year and a half, it was way over 100 campaigns per quarter. We're thinking 120, 130. How they're split between actual, let's call them hero campaigns, and reactives, it's difficult to define. I couldn't give you a number. But also, that's not counting all the reactives that we did with agencies. So a lot is it? No, we really went for it. Trying to avoid to use marketing terminology to explain how fast we were going with it. But yeah, we were doing a lot. I think we were at about 4,000 links a quarter at one point.
Yeah, wow.
DR40 plus, might I add.
Yeah, DR40 plus, that's awesome. I mean, was that kind of a goal too, where you're setting minimums for the agencies you're working out and when you're doing outreach?
Yeah, it was just, that's how we look at links in general. When you're working on I know DR40 plus has its problems because you get plenty of good relevant sites that are underneath that, of course. But when you're working with high volume, you need to have a semi-arbitrary cutoff line. And for us, it was a good link is DR40, a very good link is DR70. And yeah, that's how we would kind of categorize them.
Yeah, and I mean, to piggyback off of that, the thought that, and this is something that I'm working on now, is an analysis on link relevancy and kind of the true impact over just pure link volume. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, I think we spoke before about in this podcast, but offline we spoke as well about kind of the pitfalls of getting too far away from your core deliverables or sorry, your core focus as a site can also lead to links that just aren't relevant. And ultimately, it's like, how much work is that doing for you? Paying these agencies to get these links, it's like it becomes much more important, I think, especially when you get agencies building links for you. But yeah, what's your thought on link relevancy?
I think now it's more important than ever. Earlier I kind of nodded to the domain velocity strategy, and I think from 2024 we started to see with AI that relevancy became more and more important. The problem that I have with it is that it's impossible to measure, or at least haven't found a reliable way of measuring it yet.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of a long bet. We're putting all this effort into ensuring relevancy so that when ChatGPT, for example, finds a way of monetizing for brands, giving them information. And what I mean by that is, people start using ChatGPT. ChatGPT is taking information from Preply, for example, giving it to users, but Preply isn't getting the click anymore, and Preply isn't getting the exposure per se. So there's going to have to be some way of LLMs rewarding brands like Preply, like any brand that creates content for users. So that's where we're at. We do think that that's going to come, but we don't know what it looks like. So currently, the relevancy is probably the most important thing, especially if you're an established brand. If you're Nike, I don't think that building 1,500 new referral domains is going to do much for you. It's more about creating powerful links that have high meaning into your site and into specific pages and campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, we have done some studies. I know Ziff Davis did this great study that looked at early on, like large language models were pulling from Reddit and all these kind of this mix of information that was not, reliable, we'll say. So what they started doing is kind of curating these data sets using high DA sites and publications specifically. And so kind of taking that one step further, we were looking into kind of now a lot of these publishers are partnering, going into data partnerships and allowing these large language models, these AI technologies to leverage some of their content. So yeah, I mean, long-winded way to say, I think you're definitely on point there. Like I almost think it's even more important, and I've been talking a lot about like data, especially proprietary data. Like the more you can insert new information into these large language models and kind of associate it with your brand. So, Preply says whatever, 80% of, users, whatever, some type of unique data or stat, and then get it mentioned alongside online tutoring, online language tutor, Preply says whatever. That just like helps. I mean, it's basically SEO again, but we're doing it through AI.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, and now that you say it, just reminds me. This morning we were looking at images in AI. We found that ChatGPT won't read images on a page. So if there's an infographic on a page, it won't read it.
How interesting.
But if you give it the infographic and say read what's on this infographic, it can read it. But it seems
Right.
from what we've observed that it will purposely ignore images on a page. So what is that going to do to the infographic? Because suddenly that's super non-appealing for me to put an infographic on a digital PR page because ChatGPT
Yeah.
can't read it.
Yeah. But then it's like, what about the user, right? Like there's still going to be that balance. We have to keep things on there. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting time. Well, so I guess that's a good transition point into talking about, where you're at now and what your kind of plans are for the future. So I know you've said you kind of pulled everything in-house, right? Why did you ultimately move digital PR in-house?
Yeah, no, sure. We've moved a lot of digital PR in-house, and we have a lot more going on in-house. We just kind of kicked off again with our outreach. We're not fully in-house. We still have great agencies that we're working with.
Oh, cool.
But it is absolutely true that there was a point where we did zero outreach in-house. And I can go through the reasoning of that. I think it's quite interesting. It was a kind of essentially risk mitigation, because outreach itself is, in my eyes, risky, right? Because it takes so many hours and you're not guaranteed anything. So one of the things that we did was use our budget to spread it across agencies so that they did the outreach, which is why we really like PR agencies, because we can effectively work with a CPL of coming up with a nice idea and then spreading that time out amongst agencies, PR agencies that work with us. But now that we're looking at how to pivot, because Preply's gone from being, Series B, 300-person startup, 700-person to a 700, Series C scale. It's a much bigger brand, and we now need to think like a bigger brand. So looking for relevancy is what's more important, and so we're willing to take these ideas in house, dive in more into maybe what users are talking about, and try to address that via content. And try to get, the stories that we want placed that are powerful, relevant, meaningful in the top tier media around the world. So, for example, for us, the New York Post covering Preply because of how powerful subscription models is going to be a big winner for us. The New York Post covering Preply because I don't know. Nevada is the rudest city. Is Nevada a city? I'm not sure. Wherever it might be, Florida is the rudest city in the States. It's not irrelevant. It's great and got links from the New York Post, but we're trying to now send off very specific signals, which is just to bring it back why we're doing it in-house. We just want to take more time, build relationships with journalists, and have more control essentially around the narrative that is Preply online.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. For in-house teams that are working with agencies, what are some recommendations that you have, having gone through it now, to kind of maintain that control, maintain that narrative? Because I know, especially when you're working with a lot of agencies, it can get tough to, if you have a small team especially, you're approving ideas left and right, like you might just not have the time to dig as deeply into some of those, and you're kind of putting your faith in some of the agencies. So yeah, what are maybe some of the guardrails that you've done in the past, or learned from failures? I think that you probably have a lot of great insights into that at this point.
Yeah, the fun one that we used to use it a lot more, was if Preply was at a party, what would you talk about? And so what is it that your brand, if it was a person at a party, could talk about with some level of authority and people would listen? So if Preply was at a party, she could talk about languages and everyone will go, yeah, got it. Yeah, it makes sense. Could Preply talk about travel and culture? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Could we talk about sports? Probably not, unless it was unless it could really tie it into language. People go, you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
So that was a kind of general idea. If you're at a party, could you get away with being an expert about that topic?
I love that. That's so good.
I wouldn't advocate for one strategy and say you could definitely do this or that or the other. If you're a small brand and your competitors have 500 referring domains, and you have 50, you probably do quite well to go for a high velocity strategy in the short to medium term to catch up. If you're miles ahead of the competition, maybe you want to tone it down and really work on your brand presence. So also depends on how large the brand is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. One of the things that I feel like I've asked this on a podcast before too, it's like this idea that your customer is everyone, right? So I think a lot of people come into some of these just marketing decisions, content marketing decisions, where it's like, ultimately you want your end user to engage with the content, right? And if you're a construction client, it's a much easier, like, one-to-one. Okay, this is I'm a construction rental site, so I can play in the construction lane, and my end user is going to be interested in what I have to say. But if you're Preply, for instance, it's like anyone in the world can be interested in language. Anyone can be interested. So I've had to kind of argue against people who say like, well, I should be able to talk about anything because I want to attract users, right? So like, why can't Preply do a dating survey or something? It has nothing to do with language, but I'm getting links, and like maybe someone who's interested in dating is also going to be interested in online tutoring. I don't know. So what would you say to that? Do you ever run into something like that? I
Yeah.
mean,
So
that seems like more of like a C-suite thing, like where you get some directive from your CEO who wants to do some idea, and you have to tell them why it's that.
yeah, I think so. That is it's a correct observation. Like everyone is your customer at some point, but those customers aren't purchasing your product at all points, right? I mean, everybody goes through a stage in their life where they think, oh, I want to learn Mandarin, I want to learn Russian, I want to learn Italian, whatever it is. And you want to speak to those people when they're in that mindset, not when they're thinking, I I want to go on holiday, I need a new pair of trainers, I need to get a nursery for my daughter. Those aren't conversations that you need to be involved in. When that person is looking for the content that is relevant to them, that's when it's important so anyway, to get through to, I don't think it makes sense for brands to talk about anything, anytime, anywhere, because their customers are everyone, but everyone at some point. I feel like I word salad that, but hopefully the intent comes across.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if the idea then is like getting back to the links, right? Like, for instance, like New York Post, everybody reads New York Post. Whereas, we're talking about in the beginning, getting links from universities, like those seem more relevant to the types of industry or something or sorry, the types of customers that you'd want. But where do you draw that line for link relevancy? I mean, you did say already that it's tough to tough to kind of quantify, but like, yeah, where does that line end for you?
Yeah, well, it's a complex one because actually .edus aren't necessarily our target audience. We don't target university students. We target working professionals, for example. So the .edu is more to signal that we're a trusted authority in the education space to Google, which I know is not what you're supposed to do, but it also kind of is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a leading question, I think, because that's kind of where my head is at these days is too, is like you do need to have that mix, right? Like you have to solve for Google and you have to solve for users, and now AI is another thing, but like it's important to have that mix, I think. There are some like important links to have, right? Like you can't just go out and just expect to build a million PR links and succeed. Like you do have to have some established authority, right? And that gets me to my next question too is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but talking about organic traffic and having like an SEO presence, having actual other informational content on the site, which is something that I know you Preply has. Is this something that you were a part of building as well, or is it a different team?
Yeah, just really quickly on your last point, I think as well having
Yeah.
loads of links that aren't related to your core product can also mess up your website. If you're a travel site and you have loads of romance links, what does Google think is going on? So it's great to have those domains coming in, but they have to be relevant. And to your question, the blog team is actually a separate team. So they facilitate us on the blog. We're kind of homeless in a way. We use the blog for most of our content, but also we create landing pages, whatever it is, just work, with different teams across the company to get the content live that we need. But yeah, all of the information, top of funnel, bottom of funnel, conversion rate optimization sits with other teams across the company.
Well, so tell me about how those kind of cross over. That's interesting because I, I mentioned this earlier, like a lot of your content, best cities, yeah, best US cities for whatever. Like a lot of that has search volume, right? So is that just kind of an added bonus for some of these digital PR campaigns, or do you work in tandem with the blog or the blog team, the organic team, whatever, however it sits in the company?
So from what we've seen, DPR content itself doesn't convert great compared to dedicated blog content that we create to rank. Even the referral traffic that we get from viral campaigns doesn't convert well. It might be a good ranking factor for the blog the blog as an entity in itself, but we don't get direct conversions from it. I think how we benefit the blog is we bring links in. So if we think of that, again, the blog as an entity, we create a small, let's say we have about 10% of the content on the blog. We're building up the authority of that blog so that everything else that is converting can live, breathe, and do its stuff until it was eventually eaten up by AI overviews in the last year or so. But, you get the idea. That's how it was supposed to work.
Do you kind of coordinate with the SEO team for around kind of keyword topics? Like, does that play in a role in the ideation? That maybe they want a specific new course or something, Mandarin. So now, all right, I have to kind of build a focus around Mandarin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, DPR and SEO, like we're one and the same at Preply. We have a phenomenal SEO team, and the way that we collaborate is we look at buckets of keywords, and they will look at doing basically everything but offsite around making those keywords rank, and then we will help them by bringing the links in. The core idea that we worked around when we were going for top tier media, which we still are, but when that was like the mass top tier media strategy, was to create the content campaign that lives on the blog, have all the links going in, and then slide that out, right? Slide it out to the money pages that they're trying to focus on using on-page internal linking, basically. So yeah, we work really closely. They'll highlight opportunities for us and say, we can get 30K a month if we rank for this keyword, and we'll be like, brilliant, right, let's get on it, something like that. It's always a hybrid process between digital PR and SEO.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's funny how I kind of ideate. I think for BuzzStream now is like, what can I make that's linkable? Like, I'll find an informational topic, and then it's like, how can I make this more linkable? How can I find fresh data? It sounds like you kind of do that, but also the secondary benefit is just like, can we just create content that's going to bring in links that's going to kind of support this through internal linking and better SEO? So where I was getting with, I think, with all this is, do you think it is necessary to have content on the site to benefit from digital PR?
That's a tricky one. I could think again, it depends. It depends what you need, right? If you're a site that doesn't need a consistent high stream of links, and you just need like a one-off boost over 6 to 12 months, reactive PR is probably your way to go. Maybe in the iGaming industry, that's probably the way to go, is to create kind of campaigns that hook onto news events and try to get them to link in from a research center.
Right.
But when it comes to, if you're trying to create a long-lasting brand with consumer trust, I really do think it's worth having a blog. And the impact over time is compounding. And it's I'm going to get his name wrong. Eli Schwartz. Yeah, let's say his name.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, he talks about creating a moat, around your content. I think that's absolutely right. If you're creating strong content over time, you are essentially creating the moat around your brand that becomes more and more difficult to penetrate as the time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, you said something interesting there, and I just want to make sure listeners kind of understand. So you said, if you do need to build links at a certain velocity, and I apologize if I asked this in the beginning of the conversation as well, but are you talking about competitors? You're always looking at competitors when you're looking at link velocity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, digital PR at the end of the day is a tool to get a job done. So the question is, why are you building links? So there always has to be some benchmark. Otherwise, you're just doing digital PR because somebody told you on a podcast it was a good thing to do. But I think you need to really ask yourself, if you're, I can imagine a small brand that sells like business gifts, something like that, and there are loads of smaller competitors. Some digital PR might do you really good over 12 months to get yourself on the same level as them. maybe you're trying to get your domain authority up to 8 or 15. That's going to serve you really well. But again, that's going to be digital PR tied in with branding, so those two things kind of go hand in hand there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. That was one of the things that we found on our state of digital PR survey was like, I asked which team you work most closely with. SEO was like majority of people work most closely with SEO. And surprisingly, like brand was way, way, way down on the list. And that's something I'm hoping kind of changes in this next year. To your point, like a lot of the signals I'm seeing from Google, it's like, because click through rate and just kind of brand affinity seems to play such a big part in not only like clicks and organic search and, on the SERP, but also now potentially in AI as well. It just seems to be much more important for people to work together with their brand teams. All right, Daniel, there was one question we talked about this earlier too, and it was this idea of like, you ever consider stopping digital PR? Like, is there ever a point where you're going to get to enough content where you could start repurposing things and doing outreach on the the existing content that you have on the site? Or do you always keep it going?
Again, I guess it depends what you're trying to do. But when it comes to repurposing content, we always repurpose content. We're always looking to, if we did something in 2022, rooted to 2022, we want to repurpose that rooted to 2023. Always looking at repurposing, and that's what you're asking, like repositioning the same content with amendments, maybe even updates. Even the dream is, you've got a survey from 2023, you do it again in 2024, and look at the differences. Why have things moved? Because then you don't just have a ranking, you also have changes over, year over year. And the more you do that, the more information that you have. So yeah, I think that you should always be looking at being creative with the stuff that you have already. It's not the case that you do a campaign, it does its bits, and then you kind of throw it in the bin, metaphorically speaking. Even going back at previous campaigns that we call them made for media. So when we do a digital PR campaign, we'll list it as made for media, and then work with SEO to retarget it so it can live in Google and be found by journalists
Nice.
down the line. Yeah, so it kind of outreaches itself.
Are you changing the titles, changing the URLs? Is that the strategy there?
So the overall idea is to find what's the core messaging of the DPR campaign? What's the keyword it could rank for? Where's the gap? And then how do we convert that into an SEO, an SEO for Google campaign?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I feel like I've tried that in the past with some of the stuff, but it was like, it wasn't as strategic as it could be. And I think that is a very underutilized strategy. You have the campaign, it gets a lot of links, you kind of refocus it, and then, it just becomes this kind of passive link building machine. Yeah, that's great. I wanted to touch a little bit on international digital PR before we kind of close here, because I know that is a big strategy or big part of your strategy, because you have, obviously you said, the largest language online database for learning languages. So like different languages are clearly part of it, the different customers in different countries. So, and apologies if I missed this. I think you said in the beginning that was one of the reasons that you partnered with different agencies, because some of them might have, better abilities to do outreach in different countries. Was that right?
Yeah. When it comes to digital PR agencies, there's no doubt in my mind that the US and the UK have the best, especially when it comes to ideation and understanding the intricacies of the merge between digital PR and SEO. Going into LATAM, even going into Italy and France was tricky. Germany was tricky. Trying to find a digital PR agency, they don't really, they do now, but they didn't exist. So we would do a lot of the ideation in English and then try to repurpose it and outreach it in other geos around the world, and Another one is in APAC, right? Japan. You don't have digital PR agencies in Japan. So we used ideas that previously worked and then converted them to stories that we posted in Japanese and then used traditional PR agencies to push it. And actually a sweet tip is that in Japan, if you stick a press release out, journalists actually cover your story.
Yeah, good tip there. Yeah, well, I spoke to two people on this podcast about kind of more international. Hannah Montgomery from Shout Bravo, now I think it's part of Incubeta. But yeah, she did a whole talk on pitching internationally in at Brighton SEO last year. And yeah, one of the things she said was like data seems to play well universally, data studies. But yeah, there's like different levels and degrees of the kind of outreach you have to do. We spoke to somebody else from Australia, and she was talking about, it's kind of in its infancy there, and there's a lot more one-on-one talk with journalists. You go meet them for coffee, and yeah, so there are a lot of intricacies. I think that would be like the one thing I would say that I've learned. If you're thinking of doing it, it's probably not as easy as just copy and paste something that did well in one country and to do it in another country.
Yeah, especially, in the UK, the papers, they will take a tongue-in-cheek title. They like a bit of humor every now and then. Doesn't work so well. Even in the States, we've seen that there's been differences to how stories stick depending on how we frame it. And when you
Oh,
go
interesting.
international, it really changes. We actually brought in a consultant at one point from Germany because we were like, how do we crack Germany? We can't get any links. This content's working everywhere, but it's not working in Germany. And she said, the journalists that work at the regional newspapers should just, how I said, they have a lot of integrity. It's their role to take the news internationally and make it digestible for people from that region. And so we went, right, okay, that's, yeah. So yeah, so in Germany, you've got these journalists that are definitely more focused on data and more serious topics that they can translate for the people in their constituency, basically.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it just kind of goes to show. I love that idea of getting a consultant, someone on board, and a specific agency. I think that was one of the recommendations from Hannah too. Was like just getting someone. And you can even go on Upwork and just, does this make sense? Does this outreach make sense? All right, Daniel, I don't want to take any more of your time. I wanted to give you a quick, just kind of ability to shout out your favorite Preply piece if people haven't seen it. Digital PR piece, I guess I should say.
I think I've got recency bias, but the Myers-Briggs piece that we did is my favorite. And what we did, we took people's different personality types, and we saw how they took to learning a new language. How we did that, you can go and read the piece. We localized it into loads of different languages, but I think it's a really cool piece.
Yeah, I love it. I will definitely check. I haven't seen it, so I will check it out. Link to it in the show notes for sure, and a handful of those other pieces. I feel like there's a good opportunity for a case study, Daniel. Maybe we can get you to write one, or we can go in together and tag team a case study on the blog here too, for BuzzStream. But Daniel, thank you so much again. I know you have a new child. I know you're busy with Preply stuff. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat.
Thanks for having
Where
me.
can people find you if they have questions? Is that something you're open to? LinkedIn?
Yeah, sure. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look me up, send me a message. I'll reply.
Yeah, and I'll link to that in the show notes. All right. So thanks again, Daniel, for all your time. Again, just a reminder to like and subscribe. And thanks, Daniel. Thanks to the Preply team for putting out great content and all their partnering agencies as well. And thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you.